Absolutely. Waking up to bring America back to the principles we have been founded on. There is a better way than the path we're on. There is a way to come back and revive American exceptionalism, restore the American dream. And I'm going to tell you three things I think all of us need to get behind to bring back the American dream. Number one, we need to champion jobs and growth and opportunity. We are trapped right now in what I call the great stagnation. For 5 years, our economy has been trapped under failed economic policies. We've got the lowest labor force participation since 1978. And I'll tell you, the people who are hurting the most in the Obama economy are the most vulnerable among us. They're young people, they're Hispanics, they're African Americans, they're single moms. A couple of months ago, I was in Nebraska at a big rally, about 1,000 people out in North Platte, Nebraska. And a single mom came up to me, a young woman, and she hugged my neck. She said, "Ted, I've got 6 kids at home. My husband left me and he won't pay child support. And I'm working right now 5 jobs. None of them are even 30 hours a week because the threshold for Obamacare is 30 hours a week." Thank you, sir. Appreciate your exercising your First Amendment rights. God bless you, sir. She said, "I've got 5 jobs. I'm struggling to keep food on the backs of keep clothes on the backs of my kids, and I never, ever, ever have time to see my kids." People are hurting right now. And we need to get back to an environment where the economy is booming, where small businesses are growing, where opportunity is plentiful. The number one reason why economic growth matters is it's foundational to opportunity. Look, every one of us here, we know about opportunity, not in the abstract. We know about it in our own families. We know about it in our own lives. For me, I think about the story of my dad. 57 years ago, my father fled Cuba. My dad had been in prison. He'd been tortured as a teenager in Cuba. And he fled Batista. He came to Texas in 1957, couldn't speak English. He was 18, and he had $100 sewn into his underwear. Jack J, I don't advise carrying money in your underwear. But he got a job washing dishes, making 50 cents an hour. And he worked full time, he paid his way through school, and he went on to start a small business and to work for the American dream. Now, my dad has been my hero my entire life. But you know what I find most incredible about his story? How commonplace it is. Every one of us here, we've got a story just like that in our backgrounds. Whether it's us or our parents or our great-great-grandparents, what ties Americans together is we are the children of those who risked everything for freedom. That's what we should be fighting for, to get back to an environment of robust economic growth and opportunity for people who are struggling to achieve the American dream. The second thing we need to do is we need to defend our constitutional liberties. We need to defend the Bill of Rights, all of the Bill of Rights. You look at the First Amendment. Religious liberty is under assault. We discovered last year that the IRS was targeting citizen groups and asking citizens, tell us what books you're reading. Tell us the content of your prayers. Let me tell you something. The federal government has no business asking any American the content of our prayers. We need to defend the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. I got to tell you, in Texas, we consider gun control to be hitting what you aim at. We need to defend the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, our right to privacy. How many of y'all have your cell phones? Let me ask you, please leave your cell phones on. I want to make sure President Obama hears every word we say here today. We need to defend the 10th Amendment, or as President Obama calls it, the what? We need to defend the protection that says the powers not given to the federal government are reserved to the states or to the people. And that means a whole lot of core responsibility should be at the state and local level, starting first and foremost with education. We need to repeal every word of Common Core. Education is too important for it to be dictated by unelected bureaucrats in Washington. Educational curricula should be at the state level, or even better, the local level, where parents can have direct influence over what's being taught to our kids. And the federal government needs to fulfill its constitutional responsibility to secure our borders. I was down at the border just a few weeks ago, sat down and visited with the chief of the Border Patrol in McAllen. And I'll tell you this, President Obama is right about one thing. We are seeing right now a humanitarian crisis playing out. But it is a crisis of President Obama's own creation. It is a direct consequence of the president's lawlessness. You know, the Border Patrol interviewed over 200 people who'd come here illegally and asked them the simple question, why are you coming? What's changed? 3 years ago, we had 6,000 unaccompanied children coming illegally to this country. This year, we're expected to have 90,000. When they asked those who were coming illegally, 95% said the reason they were coming is because they believe they will get amnesty. They believe they'll get a permiso, that if they just get here, they can stay. And I got to tell you, these are little boys and little girls who are being handed over to violent coyote drug cartels who are physically assaulting, who are sexually assaulting these kids. And it is not humane, it is not compassionate to do as President Obama and Harry Reid have done, which is wash their hands and say we'll do nothing to fix the problem. The compassionate, humane thing to do is secure the borders so that these kids are not being victimized the way they are right now. And the third thing we need to do is we need to restore America's leadership in the world. Over the past 5 years, America has receded from leadership in the world. And it has created a vacuum. And into that vacuum have stepped nations like Iran and Russia and China. And it's made the world a much, much more dangerous place. We are seeing the consequences of the Obama-Clinton foreign policy playing out across the globe. It seems like the whole world is on fire right now. We need to get back to an environment where the President of the United States stands up and uses the bully pulpit to be a clarion voice for freedom. We need the President of the United States to state unambiguously, we stand with our friend and ally, the nation of Israel. And we see, your question, where's my teleprompter? I'm sorry, they're all being used in Washington. You know, I told you at the outset that I was optimistic, that I was hopeful. And I'll tell you why. The book of Ecclesiastes tells us there's nothing new under the sun. I am convinced where we are right now is very, very much like the late 1970s. The late 1970s, Jimmy Carter was in the White House. I think the similarities between Jimmy Carter and President Obama are uncanny. The late 1970s, we saw the same failed economic policies, out of control spending and taxes and regulation, producing the same stagnation and misery and malaise. And we saw the same feckless and naive foreign policy, making the world a much, much more dangerous place. And the reason I'm optimistic, thank you very much for sharing your views. The reason I'm optimistic is because in the late 1970s, a grassroots movement started. Millions of men and women all across this country who became the Reagan Revolution. Now, it didn't come from Washington. Washington despised Ronald Reagan. It came from the American people. It came from the heartland. And that Reagan Revolution swept in like a tidal wave, turned this country around. We went from stagnation to booming economic growth. We went from collapsing foreign policy to the Berlin Wall being torn to the ground. The reason I'm optimistic is the same thing is happening all over again. Everywhere I travel in the state of Texas and across the country, you see men and women standing up. Men and women who may never have been involved in politics, who had been going to work, who had been going to church, who had been raising their kids, who are looking up saying, what on earth is happening? We need to get back to the common sense principles this country was built on. Well, Sarah, thank you very much for your question. Thank you for being here, and I will certainly take your advice regarding the butter cow. You asked two different questions, so let's address them one at a time. The first question was, what should we do about the humanitarian crisis down at the border? So, it's a great question. It's an important question. You know, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago I was down in McAllen, and I visited not just with the chief of the Border Patrol, but also with a number of the line agents. And I asked them, not the top brass, but the people on the front line. I said, first of all, why are so many children coming? What's caused this? Every single line agent gave exactly the same answer. They are coming because they believe they'll get amnesty. If you look at the numbers tell a compelling story. In 2011, just 3 years ago, there were roughly 6,000 unaccompanied children who attempted to come to this country illegally. Then in 2012, President Obama unilaterally granted amnesty to some 800,000 people who had entered the country illegally as children. Now, the predictable, foreseeable consequence of that, if you grant amnesty to people who enter as children, you create a huge incentive for more and more children to come in. And as a result of that, the numbers went from 6,000 in 2011 to this year, just 3 years later, it's expected to be 90,000 little boys and little girls. And next year, it's expected to be 145,000. The only way to solve the humanitarian crisis is to end the promise of amnesty. So I filed legislation in the U.S. Senate that did several things. First of all, what it did is it provided for the federal government to reimburse the state governors who called up the state guard to defend the border. Secondly, it put in the law that the president has no authority to grant amnesty to anyone here illegally prospectively, to end the promise of amnesty. If the reason they're coming is they believe they will get amnesty, then putting into the law, removing that magnet is the way to solve the problem. Now, unfortunately, the response of the President and Harry Reid and the Senate Democrats was simply to demagogue the issue and to refuse to allow a vote. I'll tell you, I'm proud that the House of Representatives a week ago voted and passed major legislation working to solve this problem and incorporating, to a significant extent, the legislation that I had filed into what was passed by the House of Representatives. House Republicans stood up and led. They provided leadership to solve this crisis. What did Harry Reid do? He refused to let the Senate vote on any meaningful reform, and he sent all the senators home for the month of August. I don't think that's a responsible way to solve the problem. The second question you asked was about the government shutdown. And I'll tell you, look, I recognize that there are a lot of folks, particularly our friends in the media, who described the government shutdown as driven by evil, nasty Republicans, and especially yours truly. Now, I know this is shocking to the folks here, but you can't always believe everything you read in the media. Thanks to your leadership, your speaking out, I believe we have laid the foundation, we have laid the predicate for what will ultimately happen after 2016, which is we're going to repeal every single word of Obamacare. So my time is up, but I just want to say thank you, God bless you, and thank you for welcoming me to Iowa. Months ago, President Obama dismissed ISIS as the quote junior version, and we now see the face of evil that is manifested by these radical Islamic terrorists who are so extreme. They're actually thrown out of Al-Qaeda. It's not easy. I am glad the President has finally demonstrated some leadership taking the threat of ISIS seriously, but unfortunately, he's following the pattern that has characterized his foreign policy from the beginning of this campaign, which is he has laid out no clearly defined objective that we're trying to accomplish that is key to defending U.S. national security. At the end of the day, we should be focused on protecting American lives. We should be focused on avoiding a hostage situation like happened in Iran in 1979 and 80, of having Americans caught in the middle of a sectarian civil war that has waged on for 1,500 years. You know, the President often says the key to resolving what's happening in Iraq is causing the Sunnis and Shiites to come together and reconcile. The Sunnis and Shiites have been battling since 632 AD. It is the embodiment of ignorance to suggest that Americans can come in, resolve a 1,500-year religious conflict, and cause them to sit down arm in arm and say goodbye. Our focus should be on protecting U.S. national security, and I'll mention one other. It would be an enormous, catastrophic mistake for us to partner with the nation, as President Obama seems to be suggesting. Yes, ISIS are radical Islamic terrorists who want to kill us. But the enemy of our enemy is not necessarily our friend. Khomeini and the mullahs in Iran are also radical Islamic terrorists who want to kill us. And under no circumstances should we be going down the road with the Obama administration, cutting a deal that I believe will only facilitate Iran acquiring nuclear weapons capability. We need to be standing with the men and women of the military and defending U.S. national security. Airstrikes could well make sense to degrade the lethality of ISIS if they are directed towards accomplishing a concrete, defined military objective that furthers U.S. national security. What is missing right now is the commander-in-chief laying out a strategic vision. Here's what we're trying to accomplish, so everyone will know when it's accomplished. And here's why it furthers U.S. national security. And that can only come through the message. And unfortunately, right now, President Obama is not providing it. And more time doing the job to which he It is an incredible challenge. As long as we have a Harry Reid Senate, the options of reining in President Obama's lawlessness are very limited. Because Harry Reid is the #1 facilitator and enabler of President Obama's lawlessness. Harry Reid and the Democrats in the Senate shut the Senate down, prevent us from engaging in meaningful oversight, and will not allow even votes to rein in what the President is doing. It's why these Senate elections are so important. And I will note it's why I'm so optimistic that Joni Ernst is going to be the next senator from Iowa. There is no candidate in the country I am more excited about than Joni Ernst. I think she is a fantastic, principled soldier, conservative mom, and I think she will stand up and fight for the citizens of Iowa, be willing to tell the party bosses in both parties, I don't work for you, I work for the people of Iowa. Thank you very much. God bless you.